All right, it's 5:30 here at the National Weather Service in Raleigh with your updated webinar for the evening. And it's Nick Petro here at the National Weather Service in Raleigh. And thank you for joining me for this update. And obviously, well, I might have some good news perhaps with this briefing. So hang in there, and I'll show you some radar simulations in a minute that generally I think most people would find would enjoy seeing for later tonight and tomorrow and Tuesday. So hang in there. First, we're going to split this webinar up into two sections. The first section, we're going to deal with the wind and tornado threat, and the second section, like we did at 11:30, we'll deal with the river flooding situation. So starting with wind, tornado, and power outages. So we're pretty much winding down the wind. The general overall background winds, it's a little breeze out there. I can see the trees moving when I look out the window, but it's not like super windy. The main threat for wind is going to be associated with tornadoes. We've issued a couple tornado warnings. It's a prime environment right now in the lingering rain, tropical cyclone rain band situation. If it is giving that risk for tornadoes. And this is another way to look at it. Again, the main concern among these are tornadoes and then the associated damage that could produce some power outages. The ground's wet. Trees that might be leaning over, could, even with, 25, 30 mile an hour breeze that's still out there at this time, I suppose could, maybe knock over a tree that's, halfway leaning over anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were additional power outages that developed. But in terms of we're not expecting any widespread additional power outages. So in terms of those winds, for really the next, looking really at the next 3 days, what are we seeing max wind-wise? Sustained max in the low teens and wind gusts max in the low 20s. We're in much better shape, than we were 2 days ago and yesterday. In fact, by sunset this evening, winds should be under 10 miles an hour. So we should be in good shape in that regard. The main thing, again, for the rest of this evening is a tornado threat in the area highlighted yellow. And the Storm Prediction Center confirms that as well with their Sunday storm outlook, which shows a slight risk for severe thunderstorms, again, namely tornadoes, in the area highlighted yellow, and a marginal risk in the area highlighted green. Basically, in all of central North Carolina, we're at risk for a few isolated tornadoes, again, in a couple of those bands. So that's going to be the main concern, or one of the main concerns. The other main concern, obviously, is the flooding and river flooding that's expected or is already ongoing. And this is a life-threatening situation, folks. I mean, particularly across, tripping over my words here, over a big portion of central North Carolina, and that river flooding risk may go on right into the week. In fact, we're also seeing, just general standing water flooding, even away from the rivers. We're seeing, in low spots or along small streams where water has come out of the banks, or again, in typical low spots where, we've seen plenty of situations, seeing this on the news, where there's a lot of standing water and aerial flooding. So that may go on for a little while longer as well. So again, basically south of Highway 64 and along the Yadkin, we're looking at the worst of the river flooding situation. And again, there still could be some flash flood and standing water situations that develop with the remaining rain bands into the evening and nighttime hours along and north of 64. As highlighted in this graphic. In terms of the numbers, you can see in the lower portion of this graphic at the bottom, this is what we've got in terms of estimated storm total rainfall. So if you're wondering how much we've gotten, this is a good estimate. Hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to collect storm total actual raw numbers from all the gauge sites across central North Carolina, hopefully get that mapped for you. But in general terms, across the southeast portions of central North Carolina, that's where we've seen the most rain, and the least amounts up along the northern I-85 corridor up near the lakes there along the Virginia border. Seems like that's the locations that received the least amount. So obviously, this kind of rain will produce flooding, has produced flooding, and will produce river flooding. And the river flooding is ongoing already in many locations. How much more rain? Not much more across the Northeast. The greatest amounts we're expecting across the western portions of central North Carolina. I'm referring now to the graphic in the upper right. And you can see that trend is from west to east, heaviest rain across the west. This graphic just gives a sort of a mapped sense of where the river flooding is already ongoing. Excuse me. The orange, red, and purple represents minor, moderate, and major flooding respectively. So you can see, again, southeastern portions of the state where the heaviest rain fell, that's where we're seeing the most frequent major river flooding that's already ongoing. But major river flooding is expected to develop in several other locations. That is, particularly along the Cape Fear River and in the Yadkin. Notice there's a note of major flooding expected to develop. So if you're up along the Tar River, you're in good shape. No flooding there. Rainfall amounts were the least up in that area. And that's what we're looking at right now. All right. So again, I'm not going to go over this to keep this briefing as short as I can. I'm not going to go through this table one by one. I encourage everyone to take a look at these slides. As soon as we disconnect, I'm going to hit one button that'll get these slides emailed out to everybody and uploaded to our webpage. Definitely download these slides. Take a look at the timing, the crest heights, and the timing of that, and when they're expected to fall below. So this is just updated. Our hydro folks working today updated this about an hour ago. All right, so getting to the details of the individual rivers, here's the Neuse River. So you can see we're still looking at major flooding in Goldsboro. It's on its way up through moderate, approaching major flooding. It's about 1.5 feet away from major flood stage. I think in Clayton we're going to be in good shape, staying below moderate. So just look for a little bit of flooding in on the Greenway there in Clayton. Nothing too substantial there. At Smithfield, looks like our forecast, that we put out yesterday of right around 19 feet, pretty much on target. So, feeling pretty good about that. It looks like it's not far from cresting either. So that's the situation on the Neuse. What about the Cape Fear River? Here's that. I think I pointed out earlier. No, that was a different river. But don't be misled by this little flattening here. Again. That could begin to turn back up again, and it's expected to do that. So if for some reason the expectation changes, we'll update that, but this should only be a temporary slowdown, and we are still expecting moderate flooding at Lillington. Now, on the other hand, Cape Fear at Fayetteville, this number has not changed. The 62.3, we've had that for like the last 48 hours. That number has been rock solid. That's been a solid forecast, and it looks like we're well on that trajectory to hit that. So again, unless something dramatic changes, it looks like we're on target to hit to at least reach major flood stage at the Cape Fear in Fayetteville. All right. All right. What about the Little River at Manchester? Remember earlier at the 11:30 briefing, we were looking at this flattening here, and I said, hang on, don't let your guard down. It's going to start bending and going back up again. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. It's on its way back up again, and now we're still on target to hit that. We're still on target to hit that 34.4. So major flooding, record-setting flooding at the Little River in Manchester. And since I made that point, let me also mention. Notice that bend. Let's go back to Cape Fear at Lillington. I'll say the same thing applies for here. This bend might just be temporary, and then it will resume its upward motion. All right. Yadkin River, Yadkin College. It's going to take a little while longer for all the rain that's been falling there to get into the system. So of course we'll reevaluate this, but we're still looking at major flooding there, and then. Downstream at the Rocky River near Norwood, I think these numbers have been adjusted up a little bit. So the forecast is now expected to crest at 41 feet. And we've been seeing these little spikeward down. These are just bad data points. We're still on target to hit that forecast of 41 feet. So again, unless something changes, we're going to leave that forecast at 41 feet alone for now. Again, disregard these little bad points that you see showing up here and there. We're trying to remove them as we see them occur. All right. And Black River's major flood. Let's see, what do we got here? The Little River near Princeton is looks like it's cresting at minor, and the PD at Blewett Falls Lake is on its way up. Although that's not a forecast point, it looks like it's on its way to major flooding there as well. And then finally, Deep River near Moncure, that's forecast for moderate, and perhaps we'll have to see and see if that needs updated. But it's running a little bit behind, but not too bad. All right. So to summarize all of this, flash flooding is still a threat this evening, and then followed by significant river flooding that will continue through the week. Our confidence is pretty high for this. Obviously, major flooding is already ongoing in many locations, and heavy rain tonight, maybe even some additional heavy rain on Monday. And then that river flooding is going to keep going for a little while until it crests and comes down. So the next briefing will be 11:30 tomorrow, Monday. We'll continue to address the river flooding, and then we'll shift gears a little bit and look at the rest of the week for recovery with our usual routine weekly briefing, and then updated slides as we update as we can update those. So with that, we will wrap up this recorded session here.